everyone. My name's Simon, and welcome to Insert Past Upon Here, the podcast where I interview creepypasta authors in an effort to make myself, and by extension you guys, better creepypasta writers. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I'll be interviewing Ashley Franz Holzmann about his upcoming horror anthology, Vices and Virtues. Now, obviously, these stories, this doesn't come out till the 1st of October, and so you won't be able to read these until then. So there's no links in the description. Still, I would highly suggest you go out and buy this. I've been reading through it myself, and I have been absolutely loving it. And as I say, it's well worth a read. So, without further ado, here we go. Relax, get your ear holes round this interview with Ashley Franz Holzmann. So hi there, it's Simon here for Insert Past Upon Here, and today I am with Ashley Holzmann. Say hello.
Hello, it's great to be here. That feels really cliche, but it's true.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it's any consolation, it's great to have you here. So, thanks a lot for making the time to come on. So, to start off with then, tell us a bit about yourself.
So my name's Ashley Holzmann. That's probably more common in England than it is in America, as I found out growing up. I didn't know that being a boy named Ashley would be difficult until I moved back to the U.S. I grew up in England, traveled. I was an Air Force brat. Eventually gravitated towards the arts at some point in my youth, and over time, that's evolved into becoming a writer.
Awesome. So I mean, how long have you been writing for?
That's a complicated question, but if I had to put like a date on it, I would say technically 4 years now. It's been a journey to get to where I'm at right now. I actually wanted to go into filmmaking for a time, and before that, I had no interest in writing at all. Not that I thought it was uninteresting or this is uninteresting. Yeah, I started as an artist instead. I was going to go to art school. I was really pursuing that as my dream. I still studied in high school and everything, but if you look at any of my notes from that time, they were just littered with drawings and sketches and ideas and all this other stuff. And
nice.
Instead, I went into the military, and that was kind of the path I chose for a time, and I've naturally gravitated back towards the arts in my free time.
Cool. And do you remember what sort of the first thing you ever wrote was in terms of like stories?
When I was in high school, I had this idea to do all these comic books and stuff, and I still have some of this, and they weren't very good, but I had some really cool drawings for some of them. I mean, objectively, at the time it was cool, but now if I like look back at them, I still look at them sometimes. It's not as good as I wish it would be, but I would say I wasn't a writer yet at that point. It was actually in college. I took this course that was a little more unconventional than the other college courses that I had been exposed to. And I was able to write a screenplay instead of taking an exam, so I opted to write the screenplay with a buddy of mine. And I actually really enjoyed that. And when I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker later on, I had like drawn myself to the idea of like, well, me and my buddy wrote the screenplay for school. I need a writing partner because I'm not as good at it. I need to bounce ideas back and forth with another person. So then, so I convinced myself I needed a writing partner, and then I pursued a writing partner for like 3 or 4 years. And like, meanwhile, I was still in the Army for my day job. Still am, But it just kept falling through. Every time I'd find someone, life would get in the way, or they had really good ideas, but they didn't want to like write it down as much as I did. Or it would be like one of those things where like you and your buddies like come up with something and they're like, yeah, we should totally do that. And then when everyone else left that conversation, I was totally convinced that we would do it, and everyone else was like, oh yeah, I'll get to it. Like, oh, you know, life's getting in the way.
It's always the way, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so like eventually I just accepted the fact that like, hey man, if I'm going to do this, I need to teach it. I need to teach myself how to do it by myself. And that's when like this self-reliance bug kind of tossed me into writing by myself. And there's a few other factors that came involved. That's probably not the way to say it, but there's a few other factors And eventually, like, I found No Sleep on Reddit, and one thing led to another. After I was like lurking around there for a while, and I decided, you know what, like, I think I could do this too.
Nice. No, that's cool. So, I mean, do you exclusively write horror, or are there any other genres you like to step into?
No, I actually totally didn't intend for horror to be my thing. And while I love it, I like the psychological aspects of it. I'm starting to dabble more in other genres, so it'll probably be the way I work. It'll probably be years before that comes out. I have a short story. Yeah, I have a short story that I actually wrote with a buddy, one of the guys who was going to be a writing partner of mine. We wrote one that I very much like, and I'm going to enter into a competition, I think, in the spring, a small local one. But that's going to kind of be one of my stepping off points from horror. I'll always come back to the genre, I think. But yeah, I have a great interest in writing every genre. I really look up to guys like Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure. And I love how he is a creator above all things, and he'll write different genres. He'll write in different mediums. He's just creative in general, and whatever is the best platform for his story is where he takes that story. I like that.
Nice, yeah, no, I know what you mean. I'd say Neil Gaiman's also I'm a big fan of Neil Gaiman myself, and yeah, it's just the way you can flip almost in the same story, flip between genres, and it works so well. So what was it that sort of drew you to horror then? What is it about writing horror that you really enjoy?
So there is this moment when I was transitioning in my current career, and I was in a public affairs office. And for those who don't know, public affairs is kind of like the military's interactions with civilian media. And so it's very much like a straightforward thing. Like if you ever go to like the U.S. Army's Facebook page, that's run by a public affairs person.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I was doing that, and for a time, and I met some of the photographers we had in the shop in the office, and one of them was. His name is Pat, and I kind of write about this a little bit in my first book, The Laws of Nature. I forget if I wrote about it in the beginning or the end, but Pat is the guy who kind of introduced me to horror. Not that I hadn't consumed it before, but the idea of actually like creating it myself and working with him and doing stuff. And he asked me, he read that short story I just talked about, which is called The Black Box, about this little boy who's at an airport. And he read that, and he was like, wow, this is really cool. And I said, yeah, what do you think? And he wanted to film it and everything. I was like, well, I don't think it's very filmable. You have to get like a kid, and you have to film at an airport, and we're on a budget. But he wanted to become more than a photographer. He's trying to become a filmmaker, and he's doing some cool stuff now, actually. Anyways, like, we decided that we'd do something together, and that's kind of what started the ball rolling for me. And I'm one of those like really obsessive kinds of individuals where I didn't want to, I didn't want to just write something in horror. I wanted to understand it, and so I kept pursuing like more knowledge. How do I become a horror writer then? Like, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it right. And naturally, within like 3 or 4 months of that, that's when I found like No Sleep, and I started reading books about it and understanding like the genre more. And then I threw myself in it. I told myself, like, well, if I write some short stories, that'll get me better at writing screenplays for this stuff. And then that's kind of like snowballed, and I haven't moved on from writing short stories.
No, that's cool. That's cool. So, so in terms of like your job then with public affairs, I mean, do you speak to the public on a regular basis, like through the social media and things?
I had at the time. Yeah, it was really interesting. It was pretty fun. There's like various levels of responsibility to that, and it was a really cool opportunity.
Nice, yeah. Well, I only ask because obviously I know a lot of the people I know who are writers in who work in sort of public service often kind of use their experiences with the public to draw on for the writing that they do. I mean, would you say there's anything that you've drawn on, any experiences you've had in that job even that you've drawn on for any of your stories?
I would say probably not to the degree that I try to really separate like my day job from like what's become my night job. You look at like most military individuals who write books about it, it ends up like that becomes all they write about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like, it's really important for me that like I try to like create that separation. Maybe I'll write about it at one point in my life, but I really try to draw from I would say my like normal life experiences, like going to the store or having children was a big thing for me for a bit there. It still is because they're all still my children. And, yeah, that's kind of like I don't know. I like enjoy the separation because I think I use my writing as a bit of like escapism.
No, that's understandable. That's I think a lot of people do as well. Like, so I mean, in terms of like inspirations, then I mean, who is it that you what writers do you like to read? What writers do you think influence your own writing?
Oh gosh, I'd say that I'm probably influenced by media in general as much as I am other writers, and I'm just like really nerdy pop culture kind of person where yeah, I'm into everything, man. From music, anime, I consume comics, graphic novels, as those of us who consume comics usually refer to them as. And film, I'm really into cinema, really huge into that. I would actually say that like I probably consume horror the least out of all the things that I do consume. I probably watch more chick flicks, as disappointing as that probably is. I watch them with my wife in my own defense, but not that that's bad either. I enjoy quite a few.
Oh no, that's all good. I'm saying, I mean, I'm obviously weirdly enough in my relationship, it's my girlfriend that's the proper horror junkie. I'm the one who's hiding behind the pillow all the time. It's that's it.
Isn't that how it always works?
Exactly. I thought I was hardcore, but she's way more hardcore than I am.
Oh, it's lovely. Yeah, you think of like people like Stephen King who they get interviewed and they're like, everyone's always asking him like how he was like damaged as a child, and he's like, no, I was actually, I wasn't damaged at all. I'm just I enjoy creating weird stuff and everything. Like, yeah, but I'm always trying to pursue more media, more content. I really believe in like creating, developing a personality that consumes so that I can then create. So the more I like, if I ever get like writer's block or something, I just pause myself. I'll go watch a few movies, read a couple books about something. Like I've been really into like classic literature lately.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm trying to get more into that. Like I just read Lolita actually recently. And
all right, yeah.
I quite enjoyed that. I like the depth of the writing style and like the unreliable narrator. I also finally like read Catcher in the Rye, even though everyone else read that in like high school. I just finally did. Yeah, I enjoyed that too.
Awesome. Now, on a slight tangent, then, as you're a comics fan, what's your favourite graphic novel?
Oh, geez, I think that's a really hard question for me. I would say I come back to the same three. I'm not sure if that makes that any of them my favorite, but I find myself usually coming back to Moz, which is easily the most depressing thing, but also inspiring. Like piece of writing. I consider it like it's a masterpiece. I always come back to that. I come back to Watchmen.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm one of those like purist guys who like didn't like enjoy the movie as much as I enjoyed the book. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
And Kingdom Come. The Kingdom Come, I think I really enjoy Alex Ross. Like,
nice.
Probably because I really enjoy Norman Rockwell, and like I kind of link them together as like their styles. I see similarities.
That's cool.
I think of myself as one of those artists who can never paint like that. So I really respect people.
Oh, brilliant. Nice. I'd say I'm a bit of a comics geek myself. I'm always interested to hear other people's opinions on stuff.
Oh, yeah. What would your favorite be? Like, what do you always come back to?
Oh, wow. You're asking me. Well,
I mean,
I wasn't expected to ask the question. For me, I obviously love Watchmen. Watchmen's great. I always go back to. There's an English series by Warren Ellis called Transmetropolitan. It's kind of set in the future. A really cynical, jaded reporter is basically writing shock pieces about the society they live in, and he gets in trouble with like the president and stuff. I love it. It's just bleak and depressing, and I can't get enough of it.
Oh man, yeah, I know. It's totally on my list. I love Warren Ellis. I like his stuff, and I need to I totally need to read that.
No,
still do.
it's definitely worth a read. It's definitely worth a read.
I know. I feel like I've failed like nerd culture and not reading it yet. I still need to read that.
I fail nerd culture on the regular, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. No worries. So aside from us geeking out about comics, let's talk about sort of the book, which you would please know the copy you sent me actually turned up this morning. So that's I've
Wonderful.
I'd say my girlfriend has not heard much from me today. So so obviously this is a collection of a collection of stories from a variety of authors, obviously yourself included. I mean, what was it that made you want to sort of put this together?
Yeah, it was another thing I just kind of fell into. It seems to be like a normal narrative for me. But so I had written my first book, and around the same time, like half of those stories that I included, that was also an anthology. So I haven't written a novel yet. It's on, again, my list of things to do, my endless list of things to do. But I'd written my first book, and simultaneously I was writing these stories for it. Like I wasn't trying to think about the timeline now. Yeah, it was done, and it was with my editor, my friend that became my editor. And during that time, like I had this lull where I was waiting for him to get me copies of my stories back, and I decided I wanted to be a little more active in the community on No Sleep, actually, on Reddit.
Yeah.
And I just kept finding, like, it was just this rabbit hole of cool parts about the community. Like I found a couple secret subs, we called them, where like only a handful of people were there. You had to be invited to it. There was like some really interesting personalities in the community at that time. It was a little more niche, it felt like. I don't mean to be that guy that like says like, oh, it was better back in the day, but it wasn't better. It was different. I know. I'm so conceited. But it was cool, like, and I found this one secret sub, and they were talking about like a project on there that it was like a secret, and they were going to launch it, and they were going to make it like no one was going to know about it until like day one of it being released, and they wanted to have a bunch of stories kind of come out from all these epic great writers of the sub, and like a lot of really popular dudes were involved, and I was like the sweat behind the ears. I was like just coming into the genre and just coming into writing, so I was like, I need to try to impress these guys, and I really want to like become a part of this. And like I went in there, and they were trying to revive the idea, and no one was really taking charge, and no one really knew whose idea it was even at that point anymore, and where to go with it or anything else. And I was like, well, I mean, I've been in charge of stuff before, so let me read everything on here. And so there was like 100 posts throughout the history of this sub. It was like a year and a half old, and I read all of them. And I was like, okay, I think I understand where they're trying to go with this. And so then I made a post myself, and I said, hey, I'm not trying to like take this over, but if you guys don't mind, I have an idea of the direction this can go. And I've led stuff before, like I'm in the military, you know, like I understand like the concept of leadership because I have to.
Yeah.
And and like here's what I think. And my idea was to basically take like one of the more popular writers, had them write the first story, and then everyone else would kind of read his story and base off their stories off his universe. And this became what we called the All in Good Time, or Alan Good Time, which was the protagonist, the antagonist of the whole thing. It became an event that was that. And we launched all the stories on the same day. It was crazy. It took me like 3 months once it started to like organize it and trying to get writers on board and getting them to direct their stories, like Herding Cats. And there was just left and right craziness. And 2 weeks before, like it was supposed to launch, like a bunch of writers said like, hey, I can't do this, life or whatever. And so I invited a bunch of newbies in, and it was totally wild. But it was really cool, and it worked. Like the whole point was we were going to launch all these stories, and we were going to get no one was going to know. We like had the moderators of the sub in on it, and they were going to let other people break the rules and write stories based off our universe. That was the thing. And so we launched like 15 stories ourselves for 3 days in a row. So each day, one of our stories came, and it just created more and more and more of a rabbit hole, and the stories interweaved with each other, and all the readers were like, what's going on? It totally like flooded the whole sub for like 3 days, and some of the stories kept going for the longest was 8. And it worked. All these other people started writing stories about it. Up to 50 stories, I think, were written about our universe we created. And then we shut it off and didn't let anyone else write it after like day 8. So like all these stories exist, and like the whole thing was we were going to create something like semi-viral, and it was really cool. So that it worked. Like the idea worked, everything worked. It was fun, and then everyone kind of went their separate ways. And there was a couple of users who were worried about that, and they were like, "Oh no, like this really cool secret sub where we organized this crazy project is like dead. It's dead again, and I don't want to see it go away." So a few people like had ideas for like direction to go, and they said, "Yeah, like I don't want to do it." Like no one wanted to be the leader again.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. So I said, "You know what? Like okay, like let me do a project, and if you guys want to come on board, like we'll do it together." We decided not to make it as interweaving because that was insane, and I'm still like that whole thing is a book that is not out yet. It's taken so long that this project that we started after that is actually going to be released months before that one. And that's what this is.
Nice.
So like long story, but the result was this book, which is Vices and Virtues, and a lot of the same guys that were involved, same guys and girls that were involved in that Alan Goodtime event came on board for this, and it's been a lot of fun, but it's also been a lot of work. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of I said I was obsessive, so I'm also like that with my projects, and this is probably taking longer than it should have. It's been 3 years now, but it's finally ready, and I'm really proud of it.
No, I bet, and I'd say the Aaron Good Time for it sounds amazing. Like I'm pretty new to the No Sleep thing. I've been posting on the wiki for a while, but I'm pretty new to No Sleep. And I mean, do you think it's do you think that the subreddit is like conducive to stuff like that, or?
It varies, because what I really like about the subreddit is that it really limits you. And while some people find that disappointing, there's plenty of places in the world and online that don't limit you. And I think one of the coolest things about art is when you force an artist into a corner and tell them to still be creative. And once you do that, you can look at like so many different examples of an artist standing next to another artist standing next to an artist, and they have these limitations on them, and they still manage to create things that are original and different from the other artists that are still constrained by the same rules. And that's what I really enjoy about the sub, about No Sleep. That's what keeps me coming back.
Nice, yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, for me, for my writing at least, it's almost having those restrictions makes it easier for me. Like, 'cause I'm chronically suffering from staring at a blank page and wondering what to do next. And as I said, just knowing that you can keep it within those certain limits really like manages to focus me down. Now,
yeah, I think it's wonderful.
no, definitely. As I say, I mean, the more I get into the No Sleep community, the more I'm loving it. To be honest, I'm really enjoying it. Now, in terms of this book, what was the first story that sort of came out came to you for this one?
For Vices and Virtues?
Oh, sorry, yeah, of course.
I don't know. So you mean like of the writers that submitted their stories, or in general, what I thought of for myself?
What was the first story that for the book that was submitted to you?
You know what? I think it was probably Christopher J. Patton was the first writer to submit a story. He's one of those guys who he can write 20 pages in a weekend.
Wow.
And he'll just endless ideas, and he always submits things that are very polished. He's an academic, so I guess that's to be expected. But he actually wrote a story, originally titled The Martian.
Yeah.
The Lonely Martian, I think, actually was the original title. And then, of course, the book The Martian came out. Like, that's how long this project's been going on. And then the Martian came out, and we were like, oh, man, we got to change the title. Because it was about a guy on Mars and everything. And it's a really interesting story. It was actually a woman astronaut travels to Mars, and she's trying to save humanity. So we actually have some science fiction in this book. There's all sorts of examples of the horror genre in here. And she meets a man who they thought was dead. And it's so interesting. The premise itself I really enjoy. That was the first one. The story I think that I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know, you go for it, sorry.
The story I think that I've gravitated towards the most, that I just there's just something about it that really interests me, is Adam Gray, one of the writers, wrote the story he called Constance, and I don't know, something about it's just this character study, and it's
nice,
fascinating. It's fascinating to me.
Nice. Well, yeah, we'll be coming back to that one in a minute, I think. But start off with then. Let's talk about your story from the book. So, Damn It, Janet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So give us a basic overview of the story then for that one.
So essentially, what it was I forget exactly where I was when I had the idea, but I was trying to figure out what kind of story I wanted to write for this. To kind of set it up, all the stories in the book for vices and virtues are predicated on them being based off of either a vice or a virtue. And we looked at like the 7 deadly sins, or also the 7 virtues in Christianity, and we looked at examples of Hinduism and then Roman mythology. Like most what we consider to be the more dominant cultures throughout humanity have kind of labeled traits that you want that are good and traits that you want that are bad. And the first thing we actually did was we picked our traits that we wanted to pursue, and mine was lust. I wanted to pursue lust. We actually went back and forth on whether or not to include the vice and the virtue, but at the very end of the day, I kind of made this like knee-jerk reaction like a month ago. Like until a month ago, we weren't including them, and I decided to include them because I think it made it interesting to me. It made it interesting to me. But I had lust, and I wanted to try to not say that it was bad, because I think that's sloppy writing, where you're just like, twist is that they did this and it was bad. I think most of the stories aren't trying to overtly just say pursuing this is bad. I tried to write a story about how Janet, who goes from more of a normal life that we would all perceive to be normal, to meeting an individual who granted her what she perceived as a abnormal life, and that's what she enjoyed about her life, is abnormality. And what happens to a person that completely consumes themselves with that. That's what I was really trying to figure out. And I don't know how well it comes across, but I really tried to add some depth to that question, at least for me.
Well, definitely. Honestly, I mean, I really enjoyed sort of the themes you kind of explored in it. As I say, it's the kind of the... Oh, it's giving me a great excuse to use a fancy word, but the ennui of like normal life, and how, given the opportunity to escape it, how many of us would actually sort of take that opportunity? I mean, is it? What? I mean, are there any other themes that you were trying to explore with that, or?
I really, first off, ennui is an amazing word that I really love.
I know, right?
I need to really find an excuse to put that into my daily life more often. I don't know. Well, yeah, I do know. That's a filler buzzword phrase. Yeah, I really like the idea of inserting like a level of melancholia into what I do, but at the same time, not trying to define it entirely by like depression and that ennui. There we go. I really enjoy exploring concepts of family. I think that's something I really tried to put into the story of what does that mean, and why, and what do we experience in our daily life that, as cliche as this, I guess, story tool is, like, I didn't want to just say, like, everything that she wanted was in front of her the whole time, but I did, like, kind of explore that and try to not just explore that, but add other questions alongside that question so that it wasn't as generic. I wasn't trying to go for as generic.
Nice. Yeah, no, well, I think that definitely came across, because I mean, I think in the story, I hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler, but basically in the story you've got a woman who obviously leaves her husband for another man, and all the way through it, there's kind of that almost longing for the life she previously had, even though she's now got everything she wants, more or less.
Yeah, and not only that, like, hopefully this came across, or comes across, is that she doesn't realize it. Like, so she's almost like, I tried to almost make her, but not completely go for it with, like, the unreliable narrator, where the whole time she's saying what she wants, and she's experiencing it, and she loves it, and she's convincing herself that her old life sucked. But she also believes it. Like, she doesn't have to convince herself. That's her narrative, and she's sticking to it. And you know, not to spoil it, but even at the end, like, she still kind of tells herself that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say, I mean, speaking of the ending, 'cause obviously it's a great ending, and I won't obviously give away what happens. But do you? I mean, was that your sort of starting point? Was like, this is where I want the story to go, or did it kind of grow organically out of from another idea? And where did you start with writing this story?
I usually start with, like, I think I get 3 kinds of ideas for a story. I either have a title in my head, and I let it kind of percolate and grow and grow and grow. Like, I'll write story ideas years before I tackle them, which is weird. I'm still writing, like, stuff based off of, like, a thought that I had 5 years ago. Like, I write them all down. And I find myself, like, working really slowly, and so I'll have the initial idea, and I won't have a single place to take it. I won't. I could, like, sit on it and try to make myself do it, and it won't work. And I have to come back. I have to come back to it. But I've done that so much now that I actually have, like, this huge stockpile of hundreds of ideas that I'll probably never finish. And I have ideas like that where it's a title, or I have ideas that are scenes, or I have ideas that are an emotion that I'm feeling, or that I feel is impactful in some way. And Damn It, Janet came from the initial scene where she was standing in a pharmacy and she thought it was bullshit. That is it. Like, I was in a pharmacy, and I often don't feel the emotions I'm trying to convey from characters. But I was standing in a pharmacy, and I saw someone in front of me who wasn't Janet, but I kind of projected the idea of, what if that person was like this instead? And I was just kind of staring at the person in front of me online, and I thought, like, oh wow, like, what if this person on their phone was actually, like, this total narcissist and everything else? And I skewed reality, and I looked at their interaction. It was actually a very pleasant interaction between the person in front of me and the person behind the counter. But my mind was going 100 miles an hour at that point, and I wanted to make it, like, unpleasant. I wanted her to be unpleasant. I wanted it to be, it naturally became a woman. It wasn't at first, it was a guy. But then it was like, like, I usually ask myself that question is, would this be a better character as a man or a woman? And what is better? What am I trying to convey? Is that wrong for me to try to convey that with this gender or that gender? Like, I really do ask myself all these questions. Like, should it matter? Does it matter? Like, I'm always trying to think about, like, the repercussions of my decisions as a writer, because on some level I don't want it to come across as the wrong message, or for it to be, like, something I don't want to have come across. Like, I don't want to write a woman character who's a narcissist, and then for her to be shoehorned by a reader that is a sexist and say, like, oh yeah, this validates my opinions of women. It's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to go for. Really, I want to see all of my characters as people.
Nice, yeah, and I'd say, I mean, especially in the beginning of that story is the idea that you saying that that's where you got the idea kind of reminds me of it, just because there's an awful lot of, she's thinking about how all these other people are living their own kind of separate lives that she'll never know about, that I find very interesting with it. That's
a strange, like, moment of self-reflection and analysis of the world, when at the same time, like, I don't know if someone like Janet would ever think like that, but I guess that's why it's fiction.
Yeah, exactly. It's the wonders of being a writer, is you can make people think what you want. So, so in writing this, I mean, did you run up against any roadblocks whilst you were writing it? And if you did, how did you overcome them, or was it all quite a smooth process?
Oh no, it was really drawn out. Like my story. Once I had the idea for it and I finally sat down and wrote it, the roadblock I had was the second round of edits. So we had a whole group thing going on where we posted all of our stories. We actually, oh gosh, there's such a long story now that I think about it.
Well, we've got time. We've got time.
So I slowed everything way down. I'll never run a project like this again, and I learned a lot of lessons. Where after the good time event, I was like, I told myself, you know what, we need more prep time. That's what'll fix it. That's why everyone left 2 weeks before. Like, not everyone, but like half the writers like couldn't hit the deadline. And this is something I think I'll always experience, is writers hitting deadlines. Like, because it's hard to force someone to create art. And when you force an artist to create art, you're making them ask themselves a very difficult question, being, is this worthy of me as an artist? Am I proud of this? Like, I think a lot of artists ask themselves that question, and then if they're on a timeline, they're asking themselves that question very loudly. And so some writers, they hit the deadline every time, and some writers don't hit their deadline, but they're still just as brilliant. And so I told myself, hey, the way I'll get around this is I'll give them the kind of stuff I look at to inspire myself, and I'll project that on them, which was I think, a failure on my part as a leader, as a project, as the project manager and as the lead editor and all that stuff. I thought it was cool, but basically we just posted a bunch of things we found inspirational that would be kind of like thematic to this, like Cloud Atlas. Everyone was supposed to read that book, and some people did, some people didn't, but then we kind of just went down the list. There was like 20 things that we said. We'd do a month of inspiration, and every other day or every third day or a couple of times a week, I forget what it was, we just did stuff like that. And like, let's watch this movie, you name it. We did a bunch of stuff. Like, it was cool. I liked it. Not everyone felt inspired though. A few people like thanked me heavily, and then a few people didn't. And then I kind of just threw the project on. I kept drawing out the project. And eventually, like, some people moved on. Some people got their stories back. Once everyone wrote like an outline, so I made everyone write outlines first so we could like critique them as a group and try to make it better. Some writers don't respond to that the same way as other writers, and so I think that was a difficult thing to do in a group setting with creative people. Not everyone wants to have their stuff blasted in a group environment. And so while most people were receptive to it, I think I don't know how I'll tackle that in the future, but after the outlines, some people didn't get their first drafts in, and then I extend the deadline. Then it is 6 months into the project, and then like, my problem with my story was I actually changed the whole theme in between, and it didn't fit. Like, my story didn't. It was like 3 separate stories, and the beginning sounded completely different from the end as far as like tone and voice and structure, and I had to put a lot more effort into like being meticulous with it. And then after a bit, my story posted, a bunch of others got their second versions, and then that's when I reached out to a few other people to bring them on board, because some writers, their lives got in the way, and at this point, like, we were 1.5 years into the project. Stuff just kept getting extended, and at a certain point, I posted putting out like a final deadline. Hey, get your second draft of your story up. So like, I messaged everyone obsessively. I was probably really annoying, but I got everyone's second version, and then that's when the editing process started, and that's when it kind of went from this huge group project to me and the editor, and that's been 1.5 years.
Nice. That's cool. By the sounds, I want to be part of this subreddit. It sounds amazing. Like, it's good that you've got like such a dedicated group of people who are willing to sort of all do that together. As I say, it must be really good for your writing process.
Yeah, it's been really fun. That's actually, so that evolved into the biggest thing I have going on right now, which is we call it 30 Press. I'm not sure if you've seen us posting and stuff online that often, but like we're a publishing company, and me and two of the other writers from these two projects formed it, and the whole thing was to replicate that community feeling, not just from the sub, from the No Sleep sub, but also like when we had these secret things going on and we were all working together to better each other and better each other as writers. That was the goal of being critical of each other, is let's come away making these stories the best versions of themselves. And hey, let's come away making each writer the better version of themselves. And hopefully I learned something coming out of this and they learned something. And yeah, that's kind of where that evolved, is there.
Oh, that sounds great. So, so let's talk about the second story that that you from the book that we're going to talk about. I mean, you mentioned it briefly earlier. It was Constance by Adam Gray. Now, again, just give us sort of a sort of brief overview of the story and what it is you like about it.
So it's this character study. I like describing it as that because it's pretty much, it could really be other genres. It really could. And you would only have to tweak a few things. What matters most is the character of Constance. And it actually bounces back between her POV and the POV of a woman that she meets with a son and their interactions with Constance. And it kind of like, it allows Constance to also be an unreliable narrator. Not all the stories in the collection are like that. I would say most of them aren't. These might be the only two examples, but I'd have to think about that. But for the most part, like these two are the unreliable narrator stories in this collection. And Constance is a very different approach to storytelling from what I submitted. And what I really liked about it was just not only is Constance in total in the dark about like who she is as a person, but she is very convinced with the person that she actually is. And you kind of find out more about her and her life, and it's unintentional. Like at every turn, she just has this veil of life is beautiful and great and everything's shiny, and she doesn't really think about how old she is, and she just kind of bebops through life, and she's trying to help people. Like she's a really like awesome character. She's someone like I would want in my life that is optimistic beyond optimism, like a very extreme, like almost something you would see from a kid's TV show, except she also has like some real life problems, and she kind of enters like this world of horror, and she does not understand it, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, weird enough, I mean, you say about the unreliable narrator being similar to your one. I also got the idea that sort of the idea of family is also kind of very, very similar in both of them. In that, and especially with in this one where you're kind of finding out about her personal life piecemeal. You know what I mean? As the story goes on, you just find out more and more about what's going on to put her in the position she is. And I really enjoyed that, as I say. I mean was that is that something that you picked up on? Is that something that you like about it, or?
That is absolutely something I liked about it. So, like, the first version of this story, Adam, I would describe Adam as having a tough time finding the theme and kind of also some of the plot of this story, which I really enjoyed working out with him. So, the first draft of the outline was not even an outline. It was actually the first, like, 3 pages of this story was his outline. He couldn't even think of an outline. But there were so many parts of it that were just like, you need to finish this. Adam was the last story submitted. I broke the deadline for it. I was so convinced that this story was genius. To me, it was genius that I hounded him. I hounded Adam so I could get this story. I needed it. I needed this story in the book, and I needed to help Adam make it like what it could be. Like I saw something in this whole, there's a reason I have it as like one of the stories that I'm submitting in the media packet and stuff like that, and like the media kit that I'm sending out. You need to, if you want to know what this whole collection, this anthology is about, Yeah, my story's in there, but that's only because like I'm the editor and it's easier to talk about my stuff. It's not like a self-serving reason. It's actually because like, well, I know why I wrote it. I know all these other things. But then like really, you need to buy this book because you need to read constant. I believe in this. I want Adam to write forever. I want him to be famous. He needs to be in this book.
No, for sure. I'd say. I mean, I thought it was brilliant, and I enjoy how it didn't feel like it had to give you all the answers, and like you're still left wondering at the end, like what, sort of what. I'd say what's going on, but but in a good way, not in a like it's.
Yeah, like she's sick the whole time, and the story never really, because she's such an unreliable narrator. She kind of just brushes it off, and you have no idea why she's sick. She never visits the doctor throughout the story, and it's kind of like this hanging backdrop throughout the whole thing that, not to create any spoilers, but like we let that be a part of her character, and we don't let it be a part of the plot. There's plenty of other things that are a part of the plot that kind of unravel and everything else, and it just makes it to me, it makes it that much more interesting. Is like there's these underlining themes that do mean something, but I'm not sure if we should know why. Like, well, do we define them? Why? Why not? Like, how much of her past do we reveal? Like, if it's important to the character, everything else. Like, there's a couple of scenes in there that I felt were more important for the characterization of her than to progress the story. But at the same time, it does progress the story.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, you said already that you really like sort of Adam Gray's writing. How do you think he influences your own writing? What of his writing style do you wish you could take and put into your own stuff?
Oh man, the characters. Like, Adam was able to make characters that, to be cliche, popped out to me, and I felt like I could meet these people and understand, at least on some level, who they were. And I think that's something I struggle as a writer with. That is this story, my story, Damn It, Janet, being unique in that I was really trying to push myself to be more of a character writer. Usually I stick to plot and like, oh, how can I put this twist in here? Or how can I try to talk about this theme? And dialogue is the last thing I write, and sometimes I don't know how to do it, so I just don't, and I keep it all inside the protagonist's head the whole time instead.
Oh, I know the feeling on that one.
It's hard. Some people are better at it than others, and I feel like Adam was able to drive a story with dialogue and characterization, and that's something I really look up to.
No, definitely. That's fair enough. So I mean, we've touched on it sort of briefly beforehand, but with sort of the scene in general, and obviously with no, I mean, in your opinion, what makes a good story?
That's something I want to keep reading. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, so I mean, let's turn it around then. I mean, what's most likely to put you off a story when you're reading it?
Also complicated for me. Maybe I could describe it like this. When I'm consuming something of like media or content, whatever you want to call it, I usually I'll approach it differently depending on what it is. And so I enjoy watching documentaries like Shoah about Nazi Germany and like the horrors of war, but I also enjoy reading poetry, and I also enjoy listening to crappy pop music, and I also enjoy watching, different filmmakers, and I'll look at like a movie, and I'll usually characterize it as like three different things. It's either, to me, it's either a flick, a movie, or a film. And depending on what one it is, like I can still enjoy it. I can enjoy a flick where I'm just going to go to the movies. I'm going to enjoy the experience. Maybe I'll get popcorn. Sometimes I'm really cheap, and I don't. And there's like explosions and action, and the plot is what it is. It's a face value form of media, but I can still like come away from that and be like, yeah, that was cool, or oh, that was fun, But then like a movie where maybe it's funny, or maybe there is some depth or whatever, but it's not something I would classify as being like award worthy. And then the third type was the film, where like I'm going to watch this movie because it's either important or because a lot of people think that it's important. I want to be exposed to it in some way, or maybe I really respect the filmmaker or the artist behind it, or the actor who gave an amazing performance. And like, I'll watch that, and I enjoy it very much because it's an art form to me. And I think of all of them as different various forms of art that I think all deserve levels of respect. Like, someone poured portions of their life into this, and I think that's pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, I know what you mean there. So I mean, in terms of sort of like story writing generally, I mean, horror especially can be sort of kind of trope heavy. I mean, what's your opinion on tropes? Because the camp seems to be divided. People think that there are people who think that they're great and that you can really work with them, or people who try and avoid them at all costs. I mean, how do you feel about sort of using tropes in your writing?
Yeah, I think they're fun. You can always tell when a writer understands the trope he's dealing with and decides to try to tackle it anyways. Like, a few years ago, everyone was talking about Cabin in the Woods because it tackled a trope, and then it turned the trope on its head, and it was enjoyable. It was fun. It was a cool ride. I enjoy stuff like that, but I also enjoy like just a straight up like, let's watch a slasher movie. I think the coolest thing about horror to me is that, first off, no one can agree on what horror is. Like, horror fans that are into slasher movies will say that like a psychological thriller is not horror, but people who are into that will say that's absolutely horror. That's like my biggest fear. Like, Jaws isn't scary. That's not a horror movie. That's about sharks. But other people think that it is, and people will go back and forth on all sorts of films that I think absolutely can all classify as horror. It's a really cool genre that has 1,000 tropes that are repeated and repeated, but for some reason we all keep coming back to them, and we find them refreshing every once in a while, and sometimes often.
Nice, yeah. No, I understand what you mean. I mean, in terms of like the online horror scene in general, obviously it's sort of gaining some traction in the mainstream at the moment. You've got obviously Channel Zero on Sci-Fi, and you've got a few other bits and bobs that sort of really sort of push getting it into people's consciousness. I mean, what do you think of the online scene at the moment?
I think it's cool. I think technology's really been allowing creative people to explore themselves in a way that was previously shut off to them. So, like, there's more pathways. There's more pathways towards what we think of as, like, success or being found or discovered or whatever. Like, it used to be a little more difficult. Like, people would go their whole lives as writers and not find their audience. And I feel like right now you can find your audience because they're there and you can have access to them. All you have to do is create something, and you never know what's going to actually show up as being popular. I've read some things that I didn't think were very good. I put out some things that I didn't think were very good, and for some reason, like, people liked it anyways. And I think that's a testament to the variety in taste that I really just can't judge, because like, I know what I enjoy, and there's a lot of other people who enjoy a lot of other things. I still think that's pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, no, I know what I mean. I think Reddit especially is extremely good for that. I mean, since joining it, I've become just such a massive. I live and die by my upvotes now.
Oh yeah, it's huge. It's like immediate gratification as a creator. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's like a drug. Being accepted is like a drug.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think as creatives we all sort of want that validation, don't we? To sort of someone to say, yeah, I enjoyed this.
Yeah. Like, that's all I need to hear as an artist. Like, oh, I love your stuff, or your story made me cry, or like, your story made me laugh, or like, I hugged my kids afterwards. Like, all those really cool, like, wow, like, I did something and it made someone do that, and I want to feel that again.
No, that's great.
Maybe because, like, growing up I was like so not accepted for various reasons. Primarily when I was my youngest era of not being accepted was mostly because of my name, and then like throughout my life, like being like a bit of an outsider, raising and lowering in popularity. I was a weird kid. So like now, like that's always a part of me. Like a drive to be accepted, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that sort of brings me on to my final question then is, if you've got someone who's like who wants to pick up their laptop or pick up a pen or whatever and start writing their first story, I mean, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out? Like, what would you wish you'd known when you first started out?
Find other people who like the things that you like, and there's a lot of ways to do that now, and I would absolutely encourage someone to do that. On the other hand, also, don't be afraid to just put yourself out there, because you never know how much people will enjoy what you got. For me personally, the way I've pursued it is I have striven to be professional and not take myself too seriously in that. That's not what I mean. I mean, being professional as in I'm comparing myself to the people I would like to become, not the people who I was previously. You know, I'm not comparing myself to my previous self. I'm comparing myself to what I perceive could be my future self. And I'm trying to think of like, okay, if I put this book out, like, what should I do that other people that are famous are doing that can get it to be at that level? Like,
Yeah.
So editing, you know, like I need to make sure like I understand how to do formatting and cover design and all that stuff. And when it comes to my story, like I can't just have like a buddy look it over and say that it's good. Like I need to make sure that this product that I'm putting out there into the world is professional and it's on the level of something that I could at least convince myself is worthy of being in a bookstore. At the same time, that's me because I'm an extremist when it comes to like my creative outlets. And you also have to be, I need to tell this to myself all the time, like I have to be willing to put something out there into the world that's not done. And I haven't obsessed over for 3 years. Like I need to be okay with that because otherwise I'll never put anything out and I'll be that weird guy that like hoards all this creative stuff. Like, not that that's weird, plenty of people do that, but I would perceive myself as being weird if I did that. And putting yourself out there is like important. It's good. Do it. Put yourself out there. I need to get back into writing and not just submitting stuff to books and everything else. Like I need to just put myself out there some more and be cool with writing something in an hour and let's go.
That's it, and it's a really easy way of getting better as well, isn't it? Like just getting that feedback, getting that criticism, like and working from that.
Absolutely, and like being able to learn from your experiences, not just like learning from your successes and mistakes, but like your experiences and letting them just be experiences.
Yeah. Great. Well, so, I mean, those are all my questions. So, as I say, I mean, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to me. I just wanted to give you a couple of minutes, just at the end here. If there's, obviously, if there's anything you want to plug, where can people find you? If they like what they've heard, what can they do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on a ton of platforms, but that's really complicated to say. So the easiest way to find me is asforclass.com. It's ASFORCLASS.com. There's a whole story behind the name of that and everything else, but that's usually the easiest way to find me. Vices and Virtues coming out the 1st of October, and I have a few other projects coming out after that. Sign up for my mailing list. That's usually the easiest way to figure out what's coming up next. And yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me talk to you for, an hour. I'm just rambling.
It's not a problem. It's what I do this for.
Yeah, this is really fun. This is really cool. It's actually my first podcast, so I was really excited and totally nervous about it. I'm glad we made it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we got there.
We got there.
No worries. Well, I'd say thanks again. I really appreciate it. So that was my interview with Franz Holzmann, and if I haven't mentioned it enough already, his book Vices and Virtues will be out from the 1st of October on both Kindle and paperback. So I highly recommend you go out and buy it. As I said earlier, I've been loving it, and so I highly suggest you check it out. Otherwise, that's all from me. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Insert Past a Pun here. As always, go and check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Insert Past a Pun here, or head over to my website to read some of my writing and also have a nice library of past episodes. As always, like and subscribe I love the likes and subscribes. See you guys soon.